go back and rewrite everything, how can you not be proud or go without recognizing the potential behind all four of these individuals? They're winning championships. They're in the main events like they were years ago. Remember when Sheamus won his first championship within 4 months of his arrival? A lot of pressure there. Alberto Del Rio had the greatest year of his career in 2011, less than a year after his arrival in WWE. He won the Royal Rumble match. He won the Money in the Bank briefcase. He cashed it in to win 2 WWE championships. He's already won the U.S. title as another title that looks phenomenal on his resume, even though he didn't need it. But the thing is, Alberto Del Rio had a phenomenal career. When Wade Barrett came in a number of years ago in 2010 as the leader of the Nexus and the winner of the inaugural season of NXT, he had a lot of promise. He was being booked in main events against John Cena and Randy Orton. And Rusev went a number of months being undefeated as U.S. champion, eventually winning that title and losing it to John Cena for the very first time, suffering his first loss. And they went from the main events down to the lower card in WWE, the lower echelon, if you would, and it seemed like nothing was going to be done with their characters, but they picked right up where they left off, and they're right back where they deserve to be. And there's a lot that can be created with the League of Nations, a lot of great storylines with a lot of wrestlers that they've never worked with before, wrestlers they worked with in the past, and this close to WrestleMania. This is what you really need to be seeing for wrestlers who deserve to be in the main events, who have been out of the main event spotlight for far too long. To say that Alberto Del Rio went all the way from the major platform, the major stage, from WrestleManias all the way to a Mexican promotion nobody's heard tell of, that is a crying shame, and I think it's a miscarriage of justice, if I can steal that quote from Gorilla Monsoon, and get away with having done that, because I think that someone like Alberto Del Rio should be in the main events of WrestleMania, and should be in the main events of WrestleMania all the time for the incredible talent he was and how impressive he was. Looking back on 2011, yes, the Royal Rumble may have came down to Alberto Del Rio and Santino Marella, just as the Elimination Chamber match did with Santino Marella and I think Jack Swagger a number of years ago. But the thing is, it was the biggest Royal Rumble in history. That's to be highlighted, the Royal Rumble that Del Rio won, and that's the same year Del Rio went on to capture 2 championships and main event WrestleMania. So I think that Alberto Del Rio definitely can be credited for the phenomenal career that he had, along with people like Wade Barrett and Sheamus, who won the title within 3 to 4 months of his arrival, which very few people have the opportunity to do. And who did he defeat? John Cena. Who did Alberto Del Rio recently defeat for his first championship? John Cena. John Cena's track record of pushing wrestlers is very noticeable here, but the thing is, he's credited with the push of the League of Nations, like many people have been ever since the League of Nations first arrived. Do I think it's a great thing to write into the storylines, especially with the punishment of people like Rusev? Yeah, it is something great to write into the storylines, because at least it's something far more creative than what we've ever seen done for these 4 individuals, especially when you think about gimmicks like King Barrett, which really wasn't having anything done with it. And before that, it was Bad News Barrett, which was just a comical segment that was done, a comically reprieve to wrestling fans. It was kind of offered up, where he was talking about people like different wrestlers that really made no sense for him to be feuding with. Everything Stupid, in the way that Edge was on a crusade a number of years ago to kill off everything stupid in WWE, which led me to believe he was going to take out WWE creative and target them, which he didn't do, which I was really disappointed on. It would have been better as Bad News Barrett if he would have targeted WWE creative for doing what they did with his character, ruining it before that, and then he went from that to King Barrett, where there was a lot of promise first off affiliated with it. Of course, he competed with the likes of Neville and Sheamus in that tournament, and then he won that tournament, and you would think he would have had so much promise. But again, if it was 1996, 1997, how would King of the Ring Award winners of the past, like Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin, have felt being booked the same way King Barrett was? They would have never got away with it, creative wouldn't, and we would have seen the demise of people like Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin, because they probably would have went to World Championship Wrestling, companies they worked with before in the past, and we probably would have seen Triple H go back to be Terra Rising, which he hasn't been since 1993, when he first started out and got his first big break in professional wrestling, which was way, way back in the day. But it would have never happened the way it was for King Barrett. So obviously the League of Nations and their push is benefiting more than one individual. If it was, say, just benefiting someone like Sheamus and it wasn't benefiting someone like Rusev or Alberto Del Rio, then you would see an underlying issue that should be brought up and should be raised in the way of concern as a radio show host and a reviewer for a number of years. But I see more than one individual benefiting from this and going to continue to benefit from this for a very long time. Do I think it's definitely benefiting more than just the League of Nations? Yeah, it is, when you're booking them in the main events like you have been with Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose over the last couple of months. It first started out booking Sheamus and Roman Reigns in a program that could have really went the distance, but it didn't last no time before the League of Nations kind of just disappeared. But again, it follows back on how they had to go back and rewrite everything when you had someone like Seth Rollins, who was supposed to have been in the main event picture for a very long time. So obviously, it played out the way it did because of all the injuries and having to go back and rewrite everything, especially when you have your main event player like Seth Rollins, who was the mirror image of CM Punk in a character that very closely resembled someone like CM Punk holding that title for over 200 days. When you have a player holding that title for over 200 days, it is a real misfortune when he goes down with injury, but it indicates that he's overworked and he has to go through a lot of significant rehabilitation, which obviously will keep him out of the ring until August. So you had to write enough creative storylines to keep us going up until August or September, which brings us to the fall of 2016, which is way surpassing the halfway point of the year, which is something you don't want to see, especially this close to WrestleMania, which is the biggest event of the year. So hopefully the League of Nations are going to factor in to a main event of WrestleMania some way, just as the Wyatts will, with Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman being looked at for your biggest main event of the year, one of the biggest main events of the year for WrestleMania, Braun Strowman and Brock Lesnar, which is not my choice of a match for Brock Lesnar to have. Preferably, would like to see Brock Lesnar versus The Rock outside of The Rock, teaming with the Usos to face the New Day, and Brock Lesnar facing Braun Strowman, but we get what we get, and we're not going to be getting what we would like to see in preference from what we're being offered for this year's WrestleMania. But again, blame all the injuries and blame all these wrestlers for being overworked in the way of Randy Orton's and John Cena, who can be credited for what we're seeing done now with the League of Nations. But am I impressed with the League of Nations? Yes, it's far more creative than what they were doing with Rusev, having him lose to Ryback, who I think was Intercontinental Champion at that time. I could be right or wrong about that, but I know Ryback was a former Intercontinental Champion. And I think that it's great, after seeing Rusev being treated the way he was, which he didn't deserve to be treated that way because of an engagement story being posted by TMZ.com. If this were the case and we were punishing people all the time for what TMZ references or posts and their blogs on their websites, we'd be seeing this happen all the time, and we'd be seeing a lot of controversy created because of these sites that blog about this all the time, whether it be TMZ, PerezHilton.com, whatever, ETOnline.com. I think there would be more of an issue or more of a concern. So you can't really always get away with that, and that proved that WWE did wrong, and they obviously realized somewhere down the line they did wrong with Rusev and Lana, and I really wish they'd do something more with Lana. Hopefully she'll factor into this whole Divas Revolution. Also really proud of King Barrett because of how he was being booked. I really hated the whole idea of him being in the first or second match on main event. He was busted down to the mid-card when he should have been in the main event picture all along. If you can do that with Seth Rollins, you can do it with King Barrett because he has a lot of experience over someone like Seth Rollins. He was there long before Seth Rollins ever showed up. Alberto Del Rio, a phenomenal year in 2011. The resumes of these four wrestlers are unbelievable in comparison to anything I've seen over the last, say, 10, 15 years. It may be a far cry from a Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin in the way they were booked, but at least something more promising is happening with all their characters, and I am really, really proud to be seeing where we're going from here and to be talking about this, just as probably all of you are to be listening to this and to be a fan of someone like Rusev, King Barrett, Sheamus, Alberto Del Rio. I feel for everyone who is a fan of one of these four individuals, probably all four of them. I can only imagine what fans of Alberto Del Rio, Sheamus, Rusev are going through, especially King Barrett, who came in with so much promise as the winner of the inaugural season of NXT. Remember the pro of Wade Barrett being Chris Jericho, remember that, and how much promise was affiliated with that. Of course, Chris Jericho did a lot for Wade Barrett, and they feuded for a while. And then after he got away from working with Chris Jericho in one of his first initial programs as part of the Nexus versus WWE storyline, then King Barrett just blew up completely. Wade Barrett's character as the leader of the Nexus. Then he broke away from the Nexus. They gave that to CM Punk to create superstars to people like Husky Harris, who went on to become Bray Wyatt, and still getting chance of Husky Harris. That's got to be really annoying, but WWE just ignores that love. How to do that sort of thing. But Wade Barrett went on to become something phenomenal, and I think that now that he's a part of this League of Nations, as long as he stays within the League of Nations with no breakout star being looked at from the four members of the League of Nations, if there was a breakout star from the League of Nations, I don't know really at this point who it would be. If I had to guess, it would probably be someone like Rusev, who really needs something done, or King Barrett, probably one of those two of the four. Will probably do the breakup, because you don't need to do something with Alberto Del Rio, or you don't need to do something with Sheamus in the same regard, because they've won more than enough championships. They've won their fair share. When you look at someone like King Barrett, who's had that title elude him, and someone like Rusev, who's had various titles elude him, tag team titles, WWE championships, they need the push more than someone like Alberto Del Rio or Sheamus ever has. To say that you won a title within your first 3 to 4 months of your arrival definitely says a lot. So I think there's a lot of promise with these four members of the League of Nations right now. I hope they keep them together as a faction. Are they as notorious as the New World Order, the Four Horsemen, the Killer Bees, the Heart Foundation, the Legion of Doom, Demolition? So many tag teams. Tag team wrestling is a far cry from what it was. I spoke on this earlier today when I talked about the New Day and how New Day rocks, because they really do. They're one of the more entertaining teams in WWE. I think they would do a tremendous amount of justice if we had the New Day facing the League of Nations in a program where one more fan favorites and one more heels. I really appreciate what they're doing with the New Day, one of the far more entertaining teams I've seen in years. And I think tag team wrestling, although it may be a far cry from what it once was, the League of Nations are forced to be reckoned with both as singles wrestlers and as tag team wrestlers, so they could shake up either or of the divisions this close to WrestleMania, which desperately do need something creative, because we have a lot of teams that are having nothing done with their characters. I know it has a lot to do falling back on the injury of Sin Cara and putting the Lucha Dragons on the shelf, who obviously were up to feud with the New Day, and obviously if the Lucha Dragons wouldn't have went down, we probably would be seeing something far more creative done with the tag team division, and we wouldn't be seeing The Rock and the Usos teaming up to face the New Day at WrestleMania. We'd probably be looking at the New Day facing the Lucha Dragons in a tag team match where two of the New Day members would defend the tag team titles, probably Big E Langston and Xavier Woods, or Big E Langston and Kofi Kingston, with Xavier Woods playing the trumpet on the outside of the ring, and the Lucha Dragons coming away with the tag team titles. Again, having to go back and rewrite everything, you can only imagine how much of a pain in the ass that had to have been for WWE executives, the upper echelon, and WWE creative having to do that. Really feel for everybody who is ultimately suffering from all of this and everything happening in WWE. Again, Braun Strowman versus Brock Lesnar is not my choice of a main event for 2016's WrestleMania for Brock Lesnar to have, especially after having done everything in UFC and WWE. That's really going to be a pain in the ass for every Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman fan out there who are religious Paul Heyman followers, going back as far as the days of ECW. Now in the promos, they're saying Brock Lesnar is hunting from Wyatt's. That's gone a long way from Brock Lesnar being in the main event of last year's WrestleMania to him hunting for Wyatt's now. I know that Brock Lesnar would like to be doing probably something more promising with his characters, but now the chance of creating something at least is up in the air with the League of Nations, and hopefully there's going to be a lot of promise, a lot more promise than what we currently have right now as we look ahead to the halfway point of 2016. I would go as far to say by the halfway point of 2016, which will bring us up to about June or July of this calendar year.